Welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire.
What does asbestos management mean to you?
I used to really struggle with the asbestos management at my site, but now it's a breeze.
It used to be really expensive. I was paying loads, but now I've got my asbestos power team in place. It's so much easier.
Asbestos can be a pain in the arse if not handled right.
We had to stop the job because asbestos was discovered. Now we don't have that problem.
Asbestos management is easier than you think. Asbestos management. Be proactive, not reactive. Think about asbestos first, not last.
And now your hosts, best-selling authors and asbestos experts, Ian Stone and Neil Munro.
Welcome to the Asbestos Knowledge Empire. I'm Ian Stone.
I'm Neil Munro.
So today we're talking about surveys and what you should look out for and what you should be checking from the plan of work point of view of what the surveying company provide you.
Yes, if you're commissioning an asbestos survey, and the company should be putting together a site-specific plan of works or method statement with risk assessments as well, and it should detail, how they're going to conduct the survey, and we're going to talk through the kind of stuff that you should be really looking out for.
Yeah, the things that should be in there. I mean, I've seen all sorts of plans of work over the years, ranging from a single A4 piece of paper to something that looked like War and Peace. More information isn't always better.
No.
Because at the end of the day, it's got to be a usable document. So if you've got a plan of work that's presented and it's covering everything under the sun, well, that's going against the first thing that Neil said, which is a site-specific plan of work. And that's the real key thing, is how are they going to be carrying out that survey at your premise? Have they taken into consideration the risks on your site, or have you just been presented with, like I say, a simple A4 piece of paper that says, we're coming to do a survey, we'll be all right, Jack? Or have they presented something that kind of covers nuclear sites, working in and around chemical plants, working near water, and you run nothing like that? So that's the key thing, really. It's got to be site specific. So there's some obvious stuff we'll start off with. So it's the kind of, they need to do a bit of a pre-contract review to identify whether they can meet your requirements.
Yeah.
So that's just looking at your exact needs and whether they can actually fulfill them to the full extent of what you expect.
And as part of that, they should be asking you questions about your site. What the hazards are, what kind of requirement that you need. If, for instance, you need them to inspect your roof, or you've got some high-level ceilings, they should be asking those sort of questions to ensure that they include everything. So whether they need access equipment,
whether they're trained, whether their staff are trained.
Yeah,
definitely. So yeah, I mean, there's some other obvious stuff. It's like, right, well, what's your address? What's the invoicing address? Because sometimes that's different and that can always pose issues later. Site contact details. Now, here's an important one that a lot of people don't consider. It's the actual survey turnaround time. So it's very well commissioning a survey, but what is the actual anticipated turnaround time that you're expecting? Now, that should be in there. We always tell our clients up front what the exact date that they will be getting their results and what date they'll be getting their asbestos survey report, and it kind of gives you peace of mind of when it's coming and when you can expect it.
Yeah. So the plan work should clearly define when. So what date, what working times the surveyors are going to be on site for. That's really important. One from a health and safety point of view, so you know exactly when they're going to be there and what times they're going to be working.
Another thing, it's kind of that should be detailed at the beginning. It's any agreed restrictions that you might be, or they might be presenting to you for the survey report. So if there is an area of health and safety risk and things like that, any areas that they're not going to survey need to be agreed with you, ideally before the survey happens. So they should be detailed out.
Should have a kind of defined scope, shouldn't it? So defined scope, which kind of should marry up with the quote that they'd sent you. So what's the survey going to inspect? What's going to be included? So, for instance, is it a refurbishment survey back to shell of the whole building? Is it a management survey just of your garages? It's just clearly defining the exact scope of what's to be inspected during the survey.
Yeah, and along with that, for the surveyor's use more than anything, have you provided survey plans to the client, and has the surveyor got access to those? Because that can highlight a lot of information that the surveyor is going to need, like Neil said, the actual extent and location of everything, but also in a more detailed level of recording of information. Are there specific room names, room numbers that you need and you require for it to be related back to?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then great, the surveyor's got those plans and got that information. They need to use that information.
Yeah, it should detail whether you want or have a requirement for location sample labels.
Yes.
So the Asbestos Survey Guide mentions that it's a good thing to label sampling points. However, in my experience, that can kind of lead to confusing problems further down the line, because what people tend to do is when they see a sample label is get confused and presume every label is asbestos. And it can cause kind of problems down the road, and also they don't look very pretty, do they?
No, they don't. I mean, I'll be honest, I'd say 99.9% of our clients
don't want it.
Tell us not to bother.
No.
They don't want it for those reasons, because it does cause confusion and things like that. But there may be instances when they want that information, and that's fine. It can be accommodated. So, I mean, other areas to kind of consider and they need to detail in their kind of plan of work are things such as if they are doing a refurb survey and you are reoccupying that area afterwards, do you want air testing?
Yeah.
Do you want that kind of that backup information to prove before all the office staff go back in there that it is safe to do so?
Yeah, and including that any making good as well.
Making good's a big one.
If you are, doing intrusive inspections, then are they going to be making good? And if they are going to be making good, to what standard and what's included? How far are they going? That should all be clearly detailed within their plan of work, so the surveyor knows what they're doing. So touched on also access equipment. So what access equipment will be needed to carry it out, whatever's been pre-agreed within the caveats or non-caveats, if they need access equipment. So for instance, they're going to be using towers, mutes, so cherry pickers or scissor lifts. Do they need any external trades to assist them with that? Some surveyors will be fully competent to put up towers and use cherry pickers and scissor lifts, but if they're not, then they need to have the appropriate competent person there to supply that.
Yeah, and another area for kind of consideration are confined spaces.
Yeah.
Are there any ducts, undercrofts, anything like that the surveyor is going to need to access? Well, if so, they need to have everything in place, sort of 3-man teams, gas monitors, everything like that in place, the rescue systems. And
that in itself will require its own specific risk assessment, specific method statement and plan of works for that.
I mean, another thing along that line, it's kind of that they should be asking for that information is there power on site? Are there lights there?
Yeah.
Because if you go, it's different going to do a survey in a dark building with no power. Yeah. It's impossible to do. You need to allow for that so that it can be carried out safely.
So surveying by torchlight is not a good idea. It's just not enough. You need to see the whole room as a whole so you can inspect it correctly.
So again, along the health and safety kind of line, if things do go wrong, well, they should be detailing in there the nearest A&E department, nearest hospital, and have the procedures in place and written out where and how they're going to access that. Yeah. And then welfare facilities as well.
Yeah. What toilets can they use? If they have got any, if you have got any on site. If not, they need to make further arrangements for that. Is there anywhere for them to have a break? And where's the best place for that? That should be a communication with yourselves to sort of determine that.
Yeah, I mean
that could be determined in their site induction. So they should be asking you what's the requirements for your sites for getting onto them safely.
Yeah, definitely.
Lots of places have individual induction process, so you can gain access to their site. So it's kind of confirming that, because they may need to allow further time. if you've got like a 3-hour induction, then obviously they need to build that into their programme.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say. Some sites have a rock up, read this leaflet, sign the form, you're good to go. Other sites, you spend half a day essentially on a course with a test at the end. And if you don't pass that test, you're not allowed on the site. And it's fair enough. I mean, large factories, places where you've got chemicals, anything dangerous, well, you need to have a higher level of induction before you let people loose on your site.
Yeah.
And like I say, that's what the kind of things that they need to be considering and bringing to you, because, well, they're the guys that should know what they're doing to carry out this work. So they should be asking you for all of this. It should detail in there the actual type of survey that they're going to carry out, to what level, what's been agreed, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and information on how they're going to conduct that survey.
Yes.
So what's their internal procedures on how they conduct and carry out their working methods of surveying to that particular type of survey.
Building occupancy should be agreed up front rather than kind of thought about last minute when you rock up on site.
And the arrangements for sampling, if it is an occupied property or building, obviously a management survey can be done. A refurbishment survey can't be really done safely with during normal occupancy, but sampling has to be done in an unoccupied area. So for instance, if the surveyor needs to take a sample of the vinyl tiles in a room, really that should be kind of done when the occupants have vacated that room.
Definitely.
Just making those arrangements as well, and sometimes that can't fully be done until you get to site, but there should be like that procedure in place on who you need to communicate, who you need to speak to, and how that's arranged before you get to site.
That's it. It should be kind of a dedicated person on site who's fully aware of the needs and what is going to be expected, and that conversation should happen beforehand, so that when the surveyor turns up and says, I need everybody out of this room for half an hour, it's not a big surprise to the site. So some other things, sort of common health and safety restrictions that surveyors on most surveys won't access, but you kind of need to be aware of it, are things like lifts, lift shafts, water, electrical items, equipment and machinery. These are all commonplace things that they can't access without additional trades. So if you're expecting those areas to be accessed and to be expected, well, this conversation needs to happen of who's supplying that trade and at what time, because if it's machinery, you're going to need downtime on that machinery, and when's the best time to do that and to carry that out. I mean, also it should be detailed, it's the actual survey plan of how the surveyor is going to carry it out. So like Neil said, it's kind of before you even get to that, right, we're here, we're cracking on, we're taking samples, it's, well, how are they going to do it? So they should carry out a walkthrough of the entire site beforehand and then formulate a plan of where they're going to start, where they're going to finish, likelihood of asbestos items that they're going to find, things like this. And that's at the point when on site you have this conversation to kind of detail out that plan. But if that's changed from what they've put in their plan of works, then the plan of work needs to be updated before they start.
Yeah, and as part of that, they would confirm their risk assessments. So as part of the walkthrough, the surveyor will be undertaking site-specific risk assessments to determine what the risks and how they can undertake their work safely. And these should be recorded on site and updated on site as and when required.
And you're right with that. I mean, a lot of the risk assessments are kind of generic in nature because there's only, like, I don't know, for instance, climbing a ladder. Yeah. There's only one way to climb a ladder correctly.
Yeah.
But it's the stuff that falls outside of those standard risks that they then need to update their plan of work to incorporate.
Yeah.
And that might be things such as surveying in teams so that they're safe. Their personal protective equipment should all be listed out of what they're going to use and how and when. But also on that walkthrough, they might come across an area that, I don't know, might need Weddington boots to access, and you can't access it safely. I remember when we did a site years ago, there was you had to have anti-static boots because there was a risk of explosion from aerosols in that area. And most normal workers' boots don't actually have that. They're just kind of rubber soles that generate static that can then cause that risk. So it's those minor things that you might think of is normal practice, but the surveyors perhaps don't think is normal practice.
So, talked about PPE, so you should determine what PPE in there, but probably most importantly, like we're talking about asbestos surveying, sampling asbestos, inspecting for asbestos. They should have a written and detailed decontamination process.
Yeah, definitely.
In the event that they need to use that, what does that look like? What do they need to have? What equipment do they need to have? How do they do that? How do they do that safely? How do they protect the occupants that are in the building from being exposed to asbestos as part of that as well? And also, if there's any sort of waste generated by that, how do they get rid of that? What happens with that? So, for instance, overalls that have been used, booties that cover your shoes, how are they got rid of? If they've used any sort of sampling gloves or anything like that, what happens to that? Where are they put and how are they disposed of safely?
And on the sampling front, it should be detailed in a written procedure how they sample all the different types of materials.
Yep.
Because every single material is different to sample. So you sample pipe insulation in a very different manner than you do asbestos insulating board,
Yep.
which again is a very different manner to how we would sample asbestos cement.
Yeah, and every company will have their own procedure as well.
They will.
What tools do they use? What do they use to suppress the material? What bags do they even use? And what's the written procedure for labelling those bags?
Yeah, everything needs to be detailed because this essentially is it's like the work Bible.
Yeah.
It's everything, the work encyclopedia. It's like everything that you need to do for your job needs to be written down so that in the event of carrying it out, you might need to refresh your memory because, I don't know, you might have been doing something else for so long. It needs to be easy to read, easy to understand, but most of all, it has got to be site specific, hasn't it?
Yeah.
That's the key thing there.
And then we kind of move on to any sort of general health and safety procedures on site. So, for instance, they'll need to marry into your on-site fire evacuation procedures. What's the first aid procedures that they're going to follow? Do they need to adopt yours or bring their own? And kind of housekeeping procedures as well. How do they move around the building, around the property safely? For instance, an unsafe method would be to leaving tools everywhere, which is obviously they should have a procedure of walking around safely, carrying their equipment safely, which they should have been trained for as well.
Something on that, on tools, it's an interesting one. On a normal day-to-day site, you can carry around your gear, chuck it in your tool bag, carry it around, everything's fine. But one where we've had additional considerations are prisons.
Yes.
And so you can't just walk around with a tool bag because, well...
Yeah, not with a standing knife, that's for sure.
No, exactly. They're going to get half-inched and then before you know it, Andy and Morgan Freeman are going to be escaping from prison and it'll be your fault.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot to kind of consider. And kind of if the company hasn't got, half of these procedures in their plan of works, then I would definitely start questioning are they competent to do that, because this is all kind of standard stuff.
It is, yeah. The things that we're saying, it's not
just made it up and
no, it's not out of the ordinary.
It's bespoke to Acorn. This is a standard industry basics.
It is basics. It's basic things that should be in place. And if anybody is struggling to produce risk assessments, to produce plan of works, then for me, alarm bells really should be ringing, because if they can't do the basic paperwork element side of it, then how the hell can you kind of be happy that they're competent to carry out the survey to any true manner and any true depth?
Probably the biggest one for me is the doing where I believe some companies fall down is doing the site-specific walkthrough and risk assessment prior to starting works. That's kind of a big thing that we've tried to instill in, we have successfully instilled within our companies, is getting the surveyors to walk the site and actually identify the risks and doing the on-site risk assessment before starting works.
Definitely. I mean, the procedure is that they turn up to site, like we said, they do the walkthrough, they carry out the risk assessment, and anything out of the ordinary, they have to speak to the health and safety manager back at the office to either get a site visit arranged from the health and safety manager, get a new risk assessment generated. It's just having that conversation, and through that, that's how we've managed to keep our workforce safe, and that's why we've got such a low kind of accident. Yeah, exactly. Such a low accident rate. Not only for when you compare it to normal accident statistics, but for the industry as well. We've got very few in our book. I mean, I think I'm probably in there most with paper cuts and stuff, because I'm a Dimlo and I always seem to cut myself. I need to get like chainmail gloves to do paperwork. So yeah, that's it. So like saying, if you've got any concerns over somebody not producing this information, then you really should consider that the possibility they're probably not the best people for that actual work. If you want a second opinion, or you've got concerns, or you want to chat it through, you can contact us at Acorn. Neil and myself are available. You can talk to us through the Asbestos Knowledge Empire on Facebook. I hope you enjoyed this one. Remember, asbestos first, not last.